Warning, the Savage Nation contains adult language, adult content, psychological nudity. Listener discretion is advised. Now, here he is, author of Liberalism is a Mental Disorder, Trump's War, and God, Faith, and Reason, Michael Savage.
This is the Savage Nation. Phone number is 855-407-282. Here to join the conversation. There is no conversation. None whatsoever, not at this time. We will begin today's broadcast with a soundbite from today's Pied Piper of communism, and his name is Bernie Sanders. Nice old Bernie. Bernie is today's Pied Piper of the most dangerous ideology the world has ever seen, an ideology that led to the deaths of over 100 million people in the last century. Bernie knows this, but Bernie is so power mad that he takes his representation of a kindly old grandfather figure and peddles ideas that have been tried many times before. So now let's begin with Bernie, the Pied Piper of communism, giving a speech to the communists at the We the People Summit.
Whether you know it or not, you have helped transform this country in so many ways. A few years ago, just a few years ago, and I want you to think about it, many of the ideas that we talked about were thought to be fringe ideas, radical ideas, extremist ideas. Well, you know what? Because of your efforts, those ideas are now mainstream American ideas.
Well, what are those ideas, Bernie? We'll talk about that in a minute. Before I play the next soundbite from the most dangerous man in American political history, because he seems so little of a threat, old Bernie. But Bernie, make no mistake about it, is the Pied Piper of death and destruction. Listen to the next one, taken from a meeting with communists at the We the People Summit in 03.
We are obviously in a pivotal and unprecedented moment in American history. And the fights that we are waging are not just for ourselves. More importantly, they are for our kids, our grandchildren, and the future of this planet. And if anybody in this room, and I know it's not the case here, but anybody in this country who thinks that now is the time to throw your hands up and give up, you are dead wrong. Now is the time more than ever to stand up, fight back.
This filthy piece of trash should be seen for what he is. If there were not 100 million deaths from communism, I wouldn't be saying this. But there were 100 million deaths from communism. So I'm going to ask you, the people of the Savage Nation, not the We the People Communist Summit, what exactly are the fringe ideas, the radical ideas, the extremist ideas that the communist Bernie Sanders says are now mainstream? What do you think he's hinting at? He says a few years ago these fringe ideas, radical ideas, extremist ideas are now mainstream American ideas. Now, given that you are the smartest audience in the media, the Savage Nation is, why don't you spend a few seconds and call the show and tell us what these fringe ideas, radical ideas, extremist ideas that the communist Bernie Sanders is crowing about that have now become mainstream American ideas. And while you're thinking about that, the phone number is 855-407-282. I have a few other comments to make that I'm going to read from Trump's War on the Deep State, because it's important you understand that this best-selling book was not the progenitor of the concept of the deep state, but it was the number one popularizer of the concept of the deep state. And unfortunately, many copycats have now made it sound as though they wrote the book called Trump's War. While Trump's War was being written, they were supporting other candidates. While Trump's War was being written, they were attacking Trump. While Trump's War was being written, they were anti-Trumpers, never-Trumpers, anti-Trumpeteers, and now they make believe that they're all for Trump. Well, good for them. I'm glad they joined the party. But, you know, there's no such thing, there's nothing better than the original. So I'm going to read a little bit from Trump's War Against the Deep State from the best-selling book, Trump's War, by yours truly. It's an important chapter about the global agenda of the intelligence community, Trump's plan to end the new Cold War with Russia, and how to recognize fake news. It's all in this wonderful book of mine, and I'm so happy that it became #1 on the New York Times bestseller list without the help of any outlets in the media except for the Drudge Report. 855-400-7282. But let's go back to the #1 topic today. What are the crown jewels of communism that Bernie Sanders is now claiming are now American ideas? What are these crown jewels, these fringe ideas, radical ideas, extremist ideas? Because I'm going to tell you right now, I will fight this man tooth and claw right through the election. Do I think he can win? Absolutely not. But he is poisoning the minds of tens of millions of young people who are too drugged and too stupid to understand that what he is selling has already been sold and tried, and it led to the death of 100 million people. It's that simple. Also, I want to read something to you that someone sent to me on my Twitter feed, and they said to me the following. They said, I think you're being shadow banned by Twitter. It says you have a certain 166,000 real followers. Now, there are those who have millions, but they buy them. Make no mistake about it. Most fakers in the media buy their followers. They buy lists, and they pay for them. I have never paid for one single follower. It says you have 166,000 followers, only 200 likes, retweets, algorithm interference. No kidding, Jack. No kidding, Jack. So those are some of the questions. The seminal issue of our time today is sealing our borders. Borders, language, culture. If I am remembered for anything, I will be remembered for my motto of borders, language, and culture as the defining elements of any nation on earth. There is not a single nation, state on this planet that is not and has not been defined by its borders, language, and culture. Nobody has said it better than I. And my ideas have become mainstream today. I do not need the credit because I am the Lao Tzu of my time. What I need is for you to remember what I mean by borders and why they're so important. And yet, if you look at the lead story on michaelsavage.com, it's related directly to the borders of European nations. And it came to us from the Breitbart website. It's a fabulous article. And it says, Hungarian Prime Minister saying, population replacement underway in Europe. Speculators like Soros hope to profit from its ruination. Why Soros is not hunted down by Interpol and arrested for crimes against humanity is anyone's guess. The thing is, he probably paid off Interpol. Because what he has done to nations, what he has done to currencies, what he has done to one nation after another, how he recently interfered in American elections. I love the whole thing about Trump. He interfered and the Russians interfered, and everyone's up in arms over the non-interference interference. But when we know openly, without an investigation, without a Mueller, without a Comey, without an FBI, we know that this naked money changer, George Soros, interfered in American elections. He spent fortunes trying to upset district attorney races throughout this country, namely in California. And in every case, this swine was fought and overturned even by Democrats. This swine, this emigre swine, was overturned in every election he tried to manipulate through his stolen money. And I say stolen money because to me, speculating on currency is stealing money. That's how I see it. You speculate on currency trading. You break the Bank of England. You almost break the Bank of Malaysia. That's not clean money to me. That's the dirtiest money there is on the planet. That's the lead story, and it ties directly into Bernie Sanders. Because if you tie Soros and Sanders together, what you come up with is Karl Marx. If you combine Sanders and Soros, and you put the two SS's together, what you come up with is Lenin. If you put Soros and Sanders together, what you come up with is Trotsky. If you put Soros and Sanders together, what you come up with is the death of hundreds of millions of people. And that is the opening to my show. And when I come back, I will ask you again to join the show and show your intelligence on what Bernie Sanders means when he says, our fringe ideas, our radical ideas, our extremist ideas, because of your efforts, are now mainstream American ideas. Show me how far Soros and Sanders have gone to poison the American way.
Savage.
Today we are talking about the Pied Piper of communism, disguised as everyone's friendly old grandpa. The man in the crumpled suit with the blinky eyes. The man whose wife is involved in a Vermont college scam in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. The man who pretends he's cleaner than the driven snow. A man who, if he is taken seriously and not exposed for the vermin he actually is liable to destroy America and liable to lead to the deaths of hundreds of millions of people. This is an historical fact. This is not an idea of mine. This is not hyperbole of mine. But whether you know it or not, the ideas of Bernie Sanders that he says should be adopted widely in America. These ideas have been tried before in the ex-Soviet Union and elsewhere. They've been tried in Cambodia under Pol Pot. They have been tried in China under Mao Zedong. And so these fringe ideas, these radical ideas, these extremist ideas that this dangerous individual is peddling to the drug-addled generation need to be exposed, and maybe we can expose sufficiently for the stupid children of America and the losers of the world to awaken before it is too late. Now, many of you who listen to this show are so-called and self-identify as progressives, left-wing this, left-wing that, and you listen to me for amusement. You think I'm very amusing. And then sometimes you catch yourself saying, no, he's really not amusing. He really knows what he's talking about. After all, he is a member of the National Radio Hall of Fame. It's like saying, oh, really, he's a member of the Hall of Fame. Well, that means nothing. That means nothing? In my case, it means an awful lot. And so there are other factors you have to consider. I have authored over 30 books, 5 or 6 of the last which are New York Times bestsellers, so you better take me very seriously. And there's something else you progressives should know, and I'll try to teach it to you now. When I was young and 20, I espoused some very liberal ideas in my home, and my uncle, who was fairly well educated, much younger than my father, said to me, because I was a young liberal from New York, what did I know? What do young liberals from New York know? They know nothing. They're, eyes in the sky. Their eyes are to look through the lenses that are given to them by the communist teachings. So I didn't know much better. I wanted to save the world. I wanted to save the world through, I don't know what. There was no name for the system. And I became a social worker to save the world. That's until I found out that the creeps who were collecting the welfare checks were living better than I was, a young college graduate. They had better furniture. They almost had a better income. And we had to write them a check so they could scam the New York City Department of Welfare. And you couldn't even report them. But as I said, when I was young and 20, I used to argue with my uncle. And I would say to him that, well, if we had socialism in America, as I learned at Queens College from the emigres who were saved from Hitler and who came here and right away tried to undermine the country. It's sad, but true. Saved by the American troops. Saved and brought to America. And then they went into the City University of New York and undermined the City University of New York with their communist ideas. The same way the Hollywood individuals did in the early 50s. And I'll talk about that at another time. These are very important topics. Anyway, we'd argue, and I would tell them my ideas that there should be fairness, and there should be a way to help the poor, and that if the system was broken down and rebuilt, things would be better. And my uncle was a really nice guy. He had fought in World War II as an Air Force mechanic in England, I think. I don't know what he exactly did. Just a sweetheart of a man. And he said to me, Michael, he said, here's what I found in life. He said, no matter what the system is, the same people will wind up on the top, and the same people will wind up on the bottom. I didn't quite grasp what he was saying, but it's true. And I can tell you that many of the hateful types that I see on Twitter are those who have lost in life. They're complete broken losers. And what they have is not anything to offer society other than their hatred. And where do you think they would wind up if we had a socialist or communist revolution in America? Do you think that they would be running things? These losers would also be on the bottom. And who do you think would be running things if we had such a revolution, which we're never going to have for the reasons I explained before, which is that America is too fat and happy? You will only have a revolution if there's starvation. We have no starvation. We have obesity. But putting aside the fact that we'll never have a revolution in this country as long as the people are fat and happy, if we did have such a revolution as dreamed of by Sanders, Soros, and all of the other fellow travelers, who do you think would wind up on top? the very same capitalists who are now running America would wind up at the top of the communist hierarchy. They would be the ones running the Communist Party. Do you understand how that works? Because they're smarter, and they're quicker, and they're more aggressive. That's who winds up on the top all the time. So you progressives who have lost in life and think that you really want fairness when it is just your bitterness that is speaking should think very carefully, because you have it so good you can't believe it. Many of you are retired government workers or current professors, and you think you would do better in a communist system. Let me remind you, you would do a lot worse. A lot worse. So again, going back to the primary question of today, you know, I got to take the calls, but I'm editing at the last minute my new book, which will be out in October, called what? Stop Mass Hysteria. And just this morning, I reworked the section on HUAC and the so-called Hollywood 10, and how you have come to believe that these individuals in Hollywood were unfairly targeted by Senator McCarthy. You don't know that everyone who was targeted was actually a communist sympathizer or a fellow traveler. You don't know that there were actual plants from Russia in the U.S. government. Now, how do I know that's true? Well, the Venona papers came out a while ago, published by the ex-Soviets after the wall collapsed, and they acknowledged that they had taken over Hollywood, academia, and a large swath of journalism. Things go around, my friends, and here they come again, with Sanders and Soros leading the dark horses.
Savage.
All right, so let me explain something. I am talking about Bernie Sanders as the Pied Piper of communism today. I am talking about George Soros as the Pied Piper of open borders, which means the dissolution of nations as we know them. I am talking about the meltdown of Western nations, which are being manipulated by only a few people. Make no mistake about it, the masses do not want floods of illegal aliens from Mexico, El Salvador, Nicaragua, or anywhere else. They don't want them in this country. 90% of the people don't want them here. It's a small cadre of extreme leftists who are making a fortune off this human crisis who want them. And then you have people like Sanders who are not making a fortune off the human crisis, but are making a name for themselves off the human crisis. And I will once again tell you that this is all a part of mass persuasion, or as I call it, mass hysteria. I'm going to repeat to you, late October, you're going to see my last political book. Now, I've said this before, but this is my last political book. It's over. It's called Stop Mass Hysteria. But listen to the subtitle. America's insanity, from the Salem witch trials to the Trump witch hunt, from the Red Scare to Russian collusion. Stop Mass Hysteria. It summarizes everything that we're living through right now, and you will see it from a new perspective, not simply from a current political perspective, but from an historic perspective. And then you will come to understand that the Russian collusion, the Red Scare, the Trump witch hunt, the Salem witch trials are all part and parcel of a mass hysteria movement. And by exposing these hysterical movements, and I can name many others as I do in this huge book, I hope to educate the population before it is too late. But now we go back to the Pied Pipers of the mass hysteria of equality, the mass hysteria of communism under new headlines, selling it in a new way. Sanders is liked by the masses, mainly of young, disenfranchised drug addicts, raised on Adderall and marijuana, who have no concept of history, let alone, never mind, not even their own history of America. They have no idea of history of communism. They don't know what communism did in the Soviet Union. They don't know that it led to the deaths of 3 million in one little country called Cambodia. That, to me, is the microcosm of it all. I have to tell that story over and over again. You should tell it to your children and your children's children. What happens when communism takes over? Make no mistake about it. Just study Pol Pot. Pol Pot was the Obama of Cambodia. He was a polite, quiet college professor. in Phnom Penh. And then he went to Paris and he studied Marxism in Paris. And he liked what he read. He thought it sounded good in the books. He came back to Cambodia and he introduced communism under another name, like Bernie Sanders is trying to do. He never said we want communism. He called it fairness. He called it equality. He called it a basic income. He said those who were the doctors, the engineers, the teachers. He said anyone with eyeglasses was a counter-revolutionary. And then he unleashed 14 and 15-year-old thugs called the Khmer Rouge. They were given red scarves to first start by humiliating those with eyeglasses and then killing them. 3 million Cambodians were killed. Oh, yes, I should add a footnote. The very first thing that the communists did in Cambodia before the War of Terror against the people was confiscate their weapons. I have a very famous picture of that. I should put it back up on michaelsavage.com. And you will see huge caches of weapons that were taken from the people by the government the minute this little rat came back from Paris and introduced his communist ideals. Make no mistake about it. Bernie Sanders is the Pol Pot of the United States of America. And like Pol Pot, he is selling his foul message to the ignoramuses and the very young. And that is why I'm spending today and maybe tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow trying to stop this before it turns into an avalanche. America's insanity, from the Salem witch trials to the Trump witch hunt, from the Red Scare to Russia collusion. It's so many months ahead of publication, I don't want you to go to Amazon and buy it, but you can pre-order it if you want. I have to hold my fire for September, October, because if it's too far in advance, it's going to be an anticlimactic thing. This is my most important, biggest book ever. It's so targeted to stop an hysteria that could destroy this nation that you're going to want it. I'm not going to have to sell it too hard. Now, you know you will not see this book anywhere on Fox News. The nail gun operator who poses as an intellectual giant, who calls himself a great American, the nail gun operator is like himself a thug who uses his power to make sure that my works are never seen anywhere on Fox News. But without him, we made Trump's War a #1 bestseller. Without him, we made God, Faith, and Reason a #1 bestseller, number 6 or 10 best. I don't know what. It was a really good selling book. Nobody ever expected God's War to sell near 100,000 copies. God, Faith, and Reason. Nobody ever expected that to happen. I have the most loyal, most intelligent audience in the radio business. I don't care what anyone else says. It doesn't matter what they say. I know the truth. So I'm telling you that today's show goes right to that whole point. And it's odd that I'm even doing it. I didn't plan on this today. My energy's a little low. It's summertime. I wanted to do other, lighter things. But because I was working on the book, Stop Mass Hysteria, this morning, and then I heard the Bernie Sanders speech, I said, I've got to play this for the people. So before I take your calls, I know I'm a little late in taking your calls. I want you to listen again to this Pied Piper of communism, the Pol Pot of America, Bernie Sanders in 2002.
Whether you know it or not, you have helped transform this country in so many ways. A few years ago, just a few years ago, and I want you to think about it, many of the ideas that we talked about were thought to be fringe ideas, radical ideas, extremist ideas. Well, you know what? Because of your efforts, those ideas are now mainstream American ideas.
No, they're mainstream communist ideas, but never forget for 1 minute that everyone claims they're a great American, left and right. But what are these ideas? That's what I'm asking you. What are these ideas that are now mainstream that were previously considered to be fringe, radical, or extremist? Let us begin on KSFO with Michael, line 4. What's your opinion?
Dr. Savage?
Yes.
Hello?
Oh, God, I swear I'm going to start breaking things. Here's what I'm going to do. The next time I say, what do you have an idea, I'm going to smash something. I will take a hammer and start breaking my microphone. Let me say it again. I'm not like anyone else in the radio business. I work at warp speed. When I say you're on the air, talk, damn it! Don't ask me how I am. Don't say, am I on the air? I can't take it anymore. Okay, I got that out of my system. I'm having a little difficulty with the whole radio thing because my mind is too quick for this business right now. If I have to listen to collusion or Comey for one more second, I swear to God I'll go get a Kate Spade bag and I'll go get an Anthony Bourdain spoon. So let's start again. When you are called, please testify. Don't tell me how great I am. Don't tell me how wonderful I am. I don't need it. I'm not the other hosts who have no egos unless you give them one. So let's start again. Hello, everybody. This is the Savage Nation. Today we're discussing Bernie Sanders as the Pied Piper of communism. What are the fringe ideas, the radical ideas, the extremist ideas that he says are now mainstream? KMAJ, Kansas. Tina, line 1. Go ahead, please.
Hi. Open borders or no borders. Protecting people that hate us and letting people find illegal refuge here when the list is long for people to get in legally. And they don't even want to assimilate. They want to conquer us from within. And the taxpayers...
Right. This is not a typical immigration wave. This is an avalanche of invasion that we are experiencing in America and in the West and in Europe, the West in general. And this doesn't end well for anyone. It doesn't end well for the indigenous population, meaning us, and it certainly doesn't end well for the invaders. Thank you for that call. So open borders are one of the things that the communist Bernie Sanders is crowing about. Okay, we had Trump come along and he said he'd build that wall. Well, hey, what the heck? It's only a wall. So far, I don't think there's been a brick laid. But hey, MAGA. We had a Korea summit. So far, nothing's, I don't know. I guess tomorrow we'll forget about Korea. That's solved. The wall is solved. And we'll just move on because things are coming up roses, right? Tomatoes are cheaper. Potatoes are cheaper. Now's the time to grab a gal. Everything's coming up roses. MAGA. Well, it's better that we have MAGA than we have death and destruction under Hillary. I get the economy's good, the World Cup. I don't even know what the World Cup is. Is that some sort of male support? Is that what a World Cup is? Something? I don't even know what it is, actually. Everyone's working who wants to work except the malcontents and the bums and those on welfare and SSDI, those in the cafes of North Beach. They're not working. They never worked in their lives. They're on the crazy checks. The Trump really ought to crack down on fake disability in America. You want to talk about it? Last I checked, there were 14 million people on disability in this country. That was a long time ago. How many of them are really disabled? Huh? I mean, we have a whole government trying to figure out how many illegals are here and deport them. How about trying to figure out how many people are on fake disability and throw them into jail and make them return the money? There was a case in North Beach, San Francisco, not too long ago. North Beach is the old Italian district, beautiful neighborhood, great restaurants. The Italian people are very nice, but there's a bunch of hanger-on bums who sit in the cafes who've never worked a day in their life. Just bums. They drink coffee, they smoke marijuana all day long, and most of them collect what they know are crazy checks. One of them was so brazen that his father died like 25 years ago, and he had the same name as his father. He was collecting his father's Social Security check. Well, one day a government bureaucrat said, wait a minute, this guy's 109. How could he still be getting checks? They actually had a government worker, I think it was while Obama was in office, who found out that this guy collecting his father's Social Security checks couldn't be the father because the father would have been 109. He said, that doesn't make sense. So they went and investigated. They found out it was not the father. The father was dead. And they threw the bum in jail, actually. He was a lawyer, incidentally. The most hateful, anti-Semitic piece of garbage you ever met. Full of hate. A total Democrat, a total progressive, typical of those that hang around in the cafes of San Francisco in the North Beach area. They hate the world because they're losers and crooks. And now you know the rest of the story. So give me another idea of what is now mainstream that Pol Pot Sanders is boasting about when I come back. Terrific calls on the program. I don't know, maybe I should include some of today's show and stop mass hysteria before I go to press because this book is overdue for the printer. I'm just holding it up because of so much breaking news. Back in a minute.
Savage.
The FBI has issued an urgent request to reboot your home or office internet router right now. You heard me? And that is to help disrupt the massive foreign-based malware attack You may not know it, but hundreds of thousands of routers have already been compromised. The malware called VPN Filter could collect the information passing through your router. A compromised router can put your privacy and the security of your devices at stake. I have done all the things I'm about to tell you about. There's so many threats in today's digital world. Good thing LifeLock identity theft protection now includes the power of Norton Security for added protection. They use proprietary technology to help protect against identity theft, like your info for sale on the dark web. Now, Norton helps protect against online threats like ransomware. If you have a problem, their agents will work to fix it, not you. No one can stop every cyber threat or prevent all identity theft, but new LifeLock with Norton Security can uncover threats you might otherwise miss. Join now, and for the first year, get an additional 10% off the low starting price of $7.99 a month, plus taxes. Please go to LifeLock.com, promo code SAVAGE. That's LifeLock.com, promo code SAVAGE. You will thank me when you do. We are talking about the most serious topic of all. It's not about collusion. It's not about Comey. It's not about the deep state. It's about the invasion of communism into our way of life. It's a mass hysteria that is being sold as fairness and equality. And we have Pelosi selling it in another way, saying children being taken away from their moms, when we know that the children and the mom should be sent back to their home country with a care package that has the letters USA stamped on them. Pelosi is actually encouraging illegal behavior. Pelosi has now crossed the line. She did so years ago at Berkeley when she gave a commencement address and she said, we are all disruptors. Shortly thereafter, there was violence across America. I want you to listen now to a sitting member of the House of Representatives calling for uprisings all over the nation.
The Association of Evangelicals. The evangelicals testify that asylum, refugees and asylum, that is they called it the crown jewel of America's humanitarianism. Crown jewel of American humanitarianism. And in order to do away with that crown jewel, they're doing away with children being with their moms. This is, I just don't even know why there aren't uprisings all over the country, and maybe there will be when people realize that this is a policy that they defend.
Pelosi has now taken the side of illegal aliens, invaders. She's called for open revolution in the country. She is violating several different federal laws that are on the books. There is every reason to arrest Nancy Pelosi for violating federal laws against aiding and abetting illegal aliens, number one, but number two, inciting a riot. Now, if you think these are just words for effect, you're 100% mistaken. Here is one of the wealthiest women in the world sitting in her mansion on Pacific Heights calling for the masses to rise up against the American taxpayer, who have made it very clear that they do not want millions of illegal aliens pouring over our borders and sucking our welfare system, our social services dry, polluting our language by making it almost impossible to hear the language English in the workplace. Do you understand what's going on in this country? When my grandfather came here, he had to learn English to survive in the country, as hard as it was for him. Nobody bent over backwards to speak to him in his language. That was called assimilation. I'm sure it's true for Pelosi's grandfather as well. And yet we wake up and here she is working hand in glove with Sanders and Soros to undermine our way of life.
Savage. Warning, the Savage Nation contains adult language, adult content, psychological nudity. Listener discretion is advised. Now, here he is, author of Liberalism is a Mental Disorder, Trump's War, and God, Faith, and Reason, Michael Savage.
And what democratic socialism is about is saying that it is immoral and wrong that the top 1/10 of 1% in this country own almost 90%, own almost as much wealth as the bottom 90%. That it is wrong today in a rigged economy that 57% of all new income is going to the top 1%. That when you look around the world, you see every other major country providing health care to all people as a right, except the United States. You see every other major country saying to moms that when you have a baby, we're not going to separate you from your newborn baby, because we are going to have medical and family paid leave like every other country on earth. Those are some of the principles that I believe in, and I think we should look to countries like Denmark, like Sweden, and Norway, and learn from what they have accomplished for their working people.
Now, a man like him should have been on the dustbin of history a long time ago, and were it not for the 8 years of propaganda under Obama and the entire left-wing slant of the vermin in the media, he would be on the dustbin of history, probably be in jail for some of the things that he's done. But I'll go into that as we get closer to the election. I will expose the wife's problems that are being swept under the rug by CNN and others. Bernie Sanders comes along, and we caught a soundbite that you probably haven't seen anywhere else from the We the People Summit. The We the People Summit is a communist front group. And he gave a speech where he says that ideas that were only a few years ago fringe, radical, or extremist are now mainstream America ideas. I went on a tear against him once again today. I didn't even plan on it, because Bernie is the most dangerous man in American politics today. Bernie is today's Pied Piper of communism. Bernie is the Pol Pot of America. If Bernie's ideas are not challenged by myself and others, we are liable to see Khmer Rouge in this country under the guise of, instead of a Khmer Rouge, it might be a Khmer Verde. A Khmer Verde, a green scarf that they wear. They will not wear red scarves and confiscate your property and put you into work camps. They will wear green scarves, and they will have the smiles, the blank smiles of the Adderall children as they come to take you away, because you are no longer politically acceptable to the communists who are running America. You think this is hyperbole? That means you don't understand how history has worked and how it will work again. So I've asked you in the last hour, and I'll continue it in this hour, what are some of these fringe ideas, radical ideas, extremist ideas that Bernie Sanders, George Soros, Nancy Pelosi, and the other left-wing fanatics who will destroy our way of life unless they're exposed for who they are, and what they actually mean and what it leads to? What are some of these ideas that are now mainstream? And I open it up to you. I only ask you to do one thing. I don't want to yell at my callers again as I did in the last hour. I admit I have a short fuse. I've always had a short fuse, which is why I'm in radio. Any other field, it wouldn't work. It works fine in radio. I have a few rules. If you get on the air and I say, line 8, Nikki, you're on the air, talk. Don't at all say to me, how are you? Don't tell me I'm a great American. Save that for those who aren't great Americans who need to hear it from you. Just say it. Just talk. I'm giving you airtime on a national show. It's a real honor. And I know it's not easy, by the way. A lot of people freeze up. Don't think I don't know it. Just because I do this 3 hours a day for 24 years doesn't mean that you getting on the air and talking is easy. Many of you freeze up. I understand that. And I'll just try to be kind and gentle if you freeze up. I'll be kind and gentle. But don't ask me how I am, please. Okay? Here we go. WABC, Nikki, tell us about these ideas. Go ahead, please.
Got me going on a couple of things today, Michael. First of all, don't get me going on the fraud in entitlements and disability. And I finally convinced my kids that it's not undocumented aliens or undocumented workers. It's illegal aliens, and now that they pay taxes, they get that. But I actually called for 2 points. One on borders, language, culture. There was a book that was written in 1992 by Walter Wriston, CEO Emeritus of Citicorp Bank. It was entitled The Twilight of Sovereignty, How the Information Revolution is Transforming Our World. It had to do with borders disappearing. Fabulous book and right up your alley. Second point I want to make is about how the change in the culture.
Let's stop. You've come here to promote another book, Nikki, which is very unfair. I would rather that you tell me what ideas, which were once fringe, radical, or extremist, are now mainstream, according to Bernie Sanders. Can you limit it to that, please?
Gay marriage. I have no problems with gays. I have no problems with gays living together, civil unions, getting benefits.
So why are you threatened or offended by gay marriage? Explain it.
Well, it's not a marriage to me. I'm raised Catholic. Marriage is a, and I'm not even religious, but marriage to me is still a sacrament. And gay marriage is not a marriage. I know it's legal.
All right. What you're saying is marriage is between a man and a woman, period.
Correct.
Okay. That's it. That's a straight statement. Now, we should talk about free love in the communist movement because that's the subtext of what this caller just was talking about. It's not so much about gay or straight. It's about the idea of free love. And I don't know if many of you understand this, but in the 1940s, actually in the 1930s in America, according to my studies and appearing in Stop Mass Hysteria out in October, you will find that the Communist Party in New York or holding rallies, having meetings during turmoil in America. They were offering the American worker the same nonsense that Bernie is offering, something for nothing, in other words, a free lunch. And they had a lot of the communist women out there at these meetings giving out free love. I don't mean they gave a coupon, but they would actually sleep with a lot of the working class men who came to these rallies under the guise that we don't own our bodies, we're not owned, we're not going to be owned, we believe in free love and communism. And a lot of young men were taken in by the whole communist movement in the 30s because of free love. I don't know if you know this, it's a little known fact, but you'd be surprised how many different things I picked up along the road of life. That's one of them. Free love tied into the communist infiltration of the United States of America. We now go to the other callers on the show as to which ideas are now mainstream. Trish on WABC, line 5. Go ahead, please.
I am a teacher at the end of my career, and it is deplorable what these students...
All right, sorry, your cell phone's cracking up. That happens. That's the problem with radio. Nobody has landlines. I get that. Jim, you didn't hear that on the call before she went in the Holland Tunnel? Folks, if you call the show and you put on hold and when you go into a tunnel, will you please hang up? You can't be heard if you're in a tunnel, whether it's the Tunnel of Love or the Holland Tunnel or Lincoln Tunnel or the Tunnel of Your Mind. Please hang up, will you please? WABC, Dr. Singh, line 9, disagrees with me. Go ahead, Dr. Singh.
Yeah, Dr. Savage. So my contention with this is that I know Bernie Sanders talks a lot of different things, but the health care should be free for not even free, but everybody would pay into that for every citizen of the United States of America. The reason is that...
Well, let's stop. So you're talking about universal health care, a wonderful communistic or socialistic idea. And who will pay for this system?
Not be like the same, same as they have in communism, but because the reason I'm telling you is because I am in the business for 30 years, and I see what's going on with the fraud. Everybody's frauding the health care, including the entitlements, the insurance companies, the Medicare has been sold.
Well, I agree with you on, you're 100% right. Right now we have one of the most easily scammed health systems in the world, and that includes illegal aliens who scam our health care system by destroying our hospitals, by going into emergency rooms for as little as a cold. Let me tell you something. I know it for a fact. If they get a runny nose, the whole family goes in there for top-flight health care. And who do you think is paying for it? And does that do anyone a favor? They get a runny nose, they go into an emergency room. Did you know that?
Right. No, I work there. I know I work in the city. I deal with this every day in and out. But I'm saying health care for only citizens of America. We don't want to...
I think what you're saying, Dr. Singh, is that if we had universal health care for tax-paying citizens, but it wouldn't be limited to them, obviously, we'd get rid of some of the fraud and the scams that are going on now under the existing system, which is so rife with corruption.
The recent study came out that 11 countries in the world, we were at number 11 in the quality of the health care. It's very depressing. And
Wait. We're number 11? Who wrote that up? Which communist front group wrote that? We're number 11 in this country? You're kidding me.
Yeah, no. It's published in the American Journal of Medicine and JAMA.
Yeah, but come on. The JAMA is a left-wing publication. I used to read JAMA when I was in graduate school. It's moved so far to the left that they consider gun violence an epidemic that needs to be controlled by doctors.
Yeah, you may be right about that, but I'm just saying that, the study says that. So it may be a lot of flaws.
I know, but JAMA is no longer as reliable as it was back in the day. I'm telling you, JAMA today is a left-wing publication, as are many of these so-called objective scientific or medical publications that I grew up with, and I used to read with like the Bible. I mean, they were so good. But I don't want to lose your main point. It's an interesting point, Dr. Singh. What you're saying is that if we limited universal health care to to American citizens, we would actually save money in the health care system? Is that what you're saying?
We will save a lot of money. And I have written about 20-page article when Obama was trying to put in the insurance at that time, and I sent it to him. But really, I got a letter, but it really didn't go anywhere because I have a suggestion.
Dr. Singh, do you work in a hospital today? Do you work in a hospital?
Yes, sir.
All right, I'm not going to ask you which. I'm going to send you a free copy of Trump's War because I have a big chapter, Dr. Singh, on Trump's war to repeal Obamacare with my savage solutions. And I want you to look at it and call us back maybe next week when you see my solutions for fixing the overly expensive health care in the United States of America. But I disagree with you on one main point right out at the outset, which is that we have the number 30th health care system in the world. I think it's the best in the entire world, the absolute best in the entire world. And I can prove it by the fact that people come from around the world for the great care that they get in America, including the best surgery in the entire world. Why would they come here from Kuwait? Why did Fidel Castro, when he got sick, come to Miami for treatment instead of taking his Cuban healthcare system? Why? I'll let you figure out why. Why do they all come here when they get sick, all the communists? They always did, they always will, even to this day. And I think Bernie Sanders ought to go to Cambodia for his health care if he's unhappy here. Or he ought to travel down to Venezuela to see the kind of health care he'd get in the kind of country that would erupt should any of his crackpot ideas be accepted by the American people, and God forbid an evil man like him elected into major office. Take a look at the health care in South America, especially the nation I just mentioned, Venezuela. You have perfect socialism. You have perfect health care under socialism to study as a model. I never can understand why Bernie Sanders and his wife don't go to Venezuela. I tell you what, Bernie, if you're listening to the show, and I don't think you are, if any acolytes of Bernie are listening, I'm making an offer right now that I hope he refuses. Bernie, if God forbid you get sick and you want really good socialist health care, I, Michael Savage, will send you a round-trip ticket. To where? Huh? Buenos Aires? No. Caracas, Venezuela. And you will see what your ideas look like in practice, Bernie, the Pol Pot of America. Unfortunately, I'm running short of time. I will have to take a wonderful commercial break. That's who pays the bills, and we should salute them for it. And the minute I come back, we'll continue our discussion, because I know this is the topic you all want to talk about on the Savage Nation.
Savage.
All right, people, listen to what I have to say. There is a dance of death in the West and actual death in the Middle East, courtesy of the Islamo-fascists. Meanwhile, Obama, who I call the Caesar in the White House, this was written in Government Zero. Meanwhile, the Caesar in the White House entertains himself with 1,000 sycophants, partying on behind closed doors as if the Islamo-fascist hand will not touch him. He thinks he's protected from this new plague, the Black Death of radical Islam. We're facing something the West hasn't had to deal with since the wars of religion in the 16th and 17th centuries. When those religious wars ended in one place, they began in another. They lasted for over 100 years. The same thing is happening right now. The radical Muslims are on the warpath, and they are against everyone else. They are against Muslims who are not as fanatical. They are against the members of all other religions. They think they are going to take us back to some pristine religious period in human history that never actually occurred. It's all complete rubbish. These faith warriors live lower than the pigs they despise. They kidnap and rape 8-year-old girls and say the Quran authorizes it. They're not purists. They're killers. They're Nazis in headscarves. They aren't leading a religious revival. They're trying to take us back to a state of barbarism that has been extinct for 1,200 years. That was the opening to my best-selling book, Government Zero. And shortly after that, what happened? Not because of this book, but because the world had had enough of them. We were talking about ISIS at the time. What happened then was Obama's fake war against ISIS was finally shown for what it was, a fake war against ISIS. And who intervened? Russia. The very same Russia that the Democrats hate. The very same Russia that the Democrats vilify. The very same Russia under Putin, who Hillary Clinton called Hitler, used their Air Force to get ISIS on the run. And it was only after Russia's Air Force started to bomb ISIS that Obama was forced to escalate the American war against ISIS. And now they're on the run. And what I wrote then was, this is a barbaric revolution. And we have a man in the White House who denies its existence. So we're talking about ISIS. But whether he chooses to acknowledge it or not, it's going to continue until someone puts a stop to it. Well, the U.S. Air Force, British Air Force, French Air Force, Russian Air Forces more or less put a stop to it. This was a fight that did not end, though. Because like a starfish, when you cut off a spider's head, it dies. But when you cut off the leg of a starfish, the starfish can regenerate it.
Savage.
It is the 14th of June in the year 2018, and it's a countdown to October 26th, 2018, when the most important book of our time will be released by Hachette, who published all of my other bestsellers, Stop Mass Hysteria, America's Insanity from the Salem Witch Trials to the Trump Witch Hunt, from the Red Scare to Russian collusion. The reason I say it's the most important book is because we're living in dangerous times all over again. Trump and Trump supporters today are treated by the left wing, especially those on CNN and MSNBC. I'm sorry to say something, but you better hear me. The way that Trump and Trump supporters are vilified on a regular basis on CNN and MSNBC in particular, and the way we are spoken about is the way Jews were spoken about in the early days of the Third Reich in Germany. And this kind of vilification always leads to very bad results. It's one thing to disagree with a person's philosophy, disagree with a person's politics, as I do, but to take all of us who voted for Trump and support borders, language, and culture and vilify us in such a manner as we are seeing today in the mainstream media is a form of insanity. It's a form of mass hysteria. There is a fervor in the hatred of Trump and the witch hunt of Trump, the vilification of Trump supporters that I have not seen in my entire lifetime. It exceeds the Red Scare. It will lead to no good for all of us. And that is why I say it's the most important book of our time, Stop Mass Hysteria by Michael Savage, out at the end of October. Yes, it's long in advance. Meanwhile, the ideas are currently very important to discuss. So when I see Sanders captured, perhaps unknowingly, at the We the People Summit, which is a communist front group in my estimation, talking about the extremist, fringe, radical ideas that are now mainstream because of him and them, we are at a pivotal moment in history. We are a very important pivotal moment in history, and it's my intent, both on these broadcasts on the Savage Nation and through my writings, to try to educate people who think that fairness has not been tried before, people who think that income redistribution has not been tried before, been tried in several countries before. It's always ended in a mass murder. It's never ended well. Does that mean there are no excesses in the financial system that we currently live under? Absolutely not. If you read any of my writings, you will see that I've called for the restoration of fair and sane checks and balances inside the stock market, for example. In fact, if some of these checks and balances that I wrote about in my previous books have been put in place, you would not see the Dow where it is today. You absolutely wouldn't. You would not see people making trillions of dollars and hundreds of millions of dollars or $1 billion in a day. You would not see that kind of speculation permitted. It just wouldn't happen. You would not see one man called Bezos taking over the entire retail industry, a man with unlimited greed, a mania I have never seen amongst any business people, going back to those I've studied, going back to the Rockefeller era, to Standard Oil. I have never seen a madness like this in my life. I've never seen one company controlling so many businesses in a monopolistic fashion. You ask, well, why doesn't the Justice Department and its antitrust division do something about this. I'll let you figure out why. Well, what antitrust division? When is it last acted? How can you have such vertical integration going on where AT&T can buy its competitors and call it good for capitalism? Tell me. How can you have all of these media companies in so few hands where they own television stations, radio stations, newspapers, publishing companies, all under one man's control? This is not an example of capitalism as it's supposed to work. This is an example of piracy. It's just plain old piracy, and I've written about this in the past. So if you think I don't see the bigger picture and I don't understand about what's happening and I'm only for the pigs getting fatter, you're wrong. The only question is, when is this going to change and how will it change? Do we need a communist revolution to change it? Absolutely not. Is Bernie Sanders the man to change it? 100% not. He's the absolute worst case scenario. No, we have to regulate our economy in the ways it was regulated before, when we had sane, rational, balanced checks and balances in the system that were eliminated, first under Bill Clinton, then under Obama, then under Bush, and now under Trump. These checks and balances are all gone, and we the people have to say something about it. And if I, as an independent, have to say it, I'll say it. So there I am. That's the story. But let's go back to the main issue of the day, which is, what are these radical, extremist, fringe ideas that have now become mainstream, according to Bernie Sanders, because of the communist movement, which is now being sold under the guise of fairness and equality? What are they? I have some good callers. Arizona, Mick, line 8. Go ahead, please. What's your topic?
Amnesty is going to happen. As bad as I hate to say it, I'm as conservative as you can get, but it's going to happen. You've touched on some of the reasons, some of the variables. One of them I would like for you to consider is we as a population here in this country, we don't have children anymore. Since Roe v. Wade, we have killed approximately 55 million of our children, and we don't have kids. There was a study recently, about a month ago, and said the birth rate is as low as it's ever been.
Well, no, 100% right. So I'm from a Malthusian point of view, the white race is basically committing suicide. If you want to narrow it, down to whiteness, or you want to call it European Americans, you can call it either way you want it. The European American population is diminishing because they are not reproducing. Girls just want to have fun, and boys don't have the guts to be a man anymore, in plain English.
Yes, Dr. Savage, I also appreciate you calling the right, which I'm as right-wing as you can get, but I do appreciate you calling us to self-analysis, because we need to be able to self-analyze ourselves. Another reason why this is going to happen is we know the left is the left. They want the power. The people they're bringing in, extremely just uneducated, and they are used to being trampled upon. They will have a culture of people who are used to being ruled with a fist.
In other words, what you're saying is you're bringing in a peasant class that is used to having no rights whatsoever, which is perfect for the Hillarys, perfect for the Bernies.
Yes, also, sir, perfect for those on the right that are, their God is green, is money. And so these mass corporations, I don't know if people know, but the Chamber of Commerce, which is largely dominated by the right, the Republicans, they want and they are demanding illegal immigration.
Oh, I know 100% who's behind it. They're not right-wing. They're not left-wing. They're just capitalists who the saying written by Marx said that when the last capitalist is hung, a capitalist will make the rope that he's hung by. The fact of the matter is the Koch brothers, for example, they run one of the biggest amnesty businesses in the country. Did you know that? Providing services to the illegal aliens. They're totally in favor of amnesty. Now, let's go to the issue of the churches. The churches today are big business. They've always been big business. They also want amnesty because, for example, they make a fortune off illegal aliens. Presbyterian Church, Baptist Church, Jewish organizations, Catholic charities, they make billions of dollars a year off illegal aliens, which is why they're in favor of amnesty. I'm aware of it. I've written about it. I've studied it 100%.
As bad as I hate to say it, I don't want it to, but it is going to pass because these mass corporations, these big corporations, and I have nothing against anyone getting rich as long as they do it in a legitimate way, but they need people to consume these products, and so they're in bed. The business right is in bed with the maniac, insane betrayer.
Yeah. Well, you're right about that. You're a man who studies things. You are, and you see right through it all. So when someone says that they're right-wing, it doesn't mean anything to me what they call themselves. I study the individual or the organization by what they stand for, not what they say they are. I'm going to send you a copy of Trump's War. I think that you'll love that book. I think it's an important book for everyone to read in this country, especially amongst my audience. And I think that they'll learn things they don't know about the deep state, for example, and about the FBI. So I was going to do that today, but I may have to do it tomorrow. It's such an important thing for you to understand that while many today in the radio business are making believe they invented the whole concept of the deep state and they're making it like their stock in trade, it was all written about in Trump's War when it was published shortly after Trump was elected. Now it's become standard fare for the so-called conservative talking movement, and that's okay. I'm glad that my ideas are getting wider play. But if you read the chapter, and many of you bought the book, obviously it was a #1 bestseller, Trump's War Against the Deep State, I want to read you 2 pages from it. So the first thing in this discussion, which you probably heard on other shows by the fakers and the con men who are now pretending to love Trump and making believe they're real conservative, let's listen to what I said about the Russia deal, okay? And let's see where you hear it now. Did Russia really hack the election? 5 days before the January 11th press conference and just 2 weeks before his inauguration, Donald Trump was presented with an intelligence report claiming Vladimir Putin had directed a cyber attack with the intention of influencing the U.S. election. The report said the cyber attack did not target or compromise any systems involved in vote tallying, but did hack the DNC's email server and provide the infamous Podesta emails to WikiLeaks. So even if Russia did what the Democrats and the media say they did, not a single vote for Hillary or Trump was added or subtracted. The report, presented with all the usual official government trappings, seemed to partially confirm the media narrative trumpeted since the election that Trump's victory represented Moscow's will over the American people. But buried in the reporting, on the release of this report, was an important detail. The version of the report released to the public lacked the evidence that intelligence officials said was included in a classified version, which they described as information on the sources and methods used to collect the information about Mr. Putin and his associates. In other words, the public was provided with the conclusions the intelligence agencies drew, but not the evidence they drew them from. This is in the chapter, Trump's War Against the Deep State, in the important book, Trump's War, written by yours truly, Michael Savage. I present this to you as evidence that I know exactly what is going on today, and although I choose not to talk about the deep state as though I invented the words and hack it over and over and over and over and over every day, I'm fully aware of the deep state as I am of the big lie. But let's focus today on the most dangerous man in the political landscape, that is old Grandpa Bernie Sanders, the Pied Piper of communism. When I return, once again, what are these fringe ideas, radical ideas, extremist ideas that Bernie is glowing and crowing about that are now part of the American mainstream?
Savage.
Well, look, I'm going to talk about something that's near and dear to everyone's heart. It doesn't matter what your politics are. Summer plans, vacation. But what if your car breaks down? What if you're hit with a huge repair bill while you're out of town, in the middle of nowhere, and all the money you saved for that vacation has to go to pay to fix your car? If you have extended vehicle protection from CarShield, you're not going to worry about these unwelcome surprises. Look, if your car breaks down after the manufacturer's warranty expires, you could be out of pocket thousands to get it fixed. We all know this by now. An engine, thousands of dollars. A simple sensor, over $1,000. Nothing simple about today's cars, right? And that's why CarShield is so important to you. You can pick your own mechanic, a dealership to do the work, your choice. CarShield will give you 24/7 roadside assistance. and a rental car while yours is being fixed. Pay attention now. If your car has 5,000 to 150,000 miles, doesn't mean you have to pay high repair bills. CarShield administrators have paid out close to $2 billion in claims, and they're ready to help you. So save yourself thousands in future car repairs, and don't worry about missing out this summer. Get covered by the ultimate and extended vehicle protection. Simply call 800, are you ready? Car 6100. Did you catch that one? 800 Car 6100, mention code SAVAGE, or visit carshield.com. Use code SAVAGE to save 10%. Again, that's carshield.com, code SAVAGE, or call 800 Car 6100, code SAVAGE. A deductible may apply. Great company. Highly recommended. We're talking about the serious consequences of rhetoric. In this case, the rhetoric of Nancy Pelosi calling for basically uprisings all over the country. She's calling for revolution all over the country, just as the Marxists did in Russia, as she sits in her winter palace on Pacific Heights. She asks for uprising all over the country. Then on the bottom of the hill, we have the old man Sanders, everyone's favorite grandfather, the kind that you dismissed as a crackpot many years ago with the smelly suit, with the tuna fish stain in his lapel, a man who espoused these stupid ideas, would have been laughed off the stage in this country just a few years ago. But after a generation raised on drugs and propaganda, after 8 years of the Pied Piper of Marxism, Barack Obama and his fellow travelers in the media, these fringe ideas, these radical ideas, these extremist ideas that Bernie is crowing about are, in fact, now injected into the American way of life. Bernie says we're at a pivotal moment in history, and he wants to run for the presidency by espousing these vile ideas that led to 3 million human skulls in Cambodia, that led to 60 million deaths in the Soviet Union, that led to death and destruction across the planet. Whenever these ideas of equality are sold to the masses. And just remember what I told you at the beginning of the show. The very same people who now you hate because they have all the money and the better women and the nicer shoes and the better cars, they will be running the system no matter who wins and no matter what the system is. Those at the top and that type will wind up at the top again. And those of you on the bottom will still be on the bottom. That's why you're on the bottom now. And that's why you'll be on the bottom forever. And you ought to count your lucky stars that you have the largesse of we the taxpayer today to pay for everything that you enjoy in this nation. I'm Michael Savage, trying to stop mass hysteria before it spreads and it's too late.
Michael Savage, a host like no other. A host like no other.